Hello, everyone. It's Georgie Girl from Authentic Self Compassion. I am so excited today because we have Adrianne Vangool here, and she is going to speak to us about the journey of self care to we care. So, welcome, Adrianne. So nice to meet you, and so nice to have you here with us today.
Yes, thank you for having me. I'm excited for this.
Yes, thank you. Can you just share a little bit about yourself and how you started writing this book and why you started writing this book?
Yeah, so I'm a physiotherapist in Saskatoon as well as a yoga therapist. And when I was going through I won't give you the whole boring story, but I was going through my schooling as a physiotherapist. I was at the same time just retired from being a competitive athlete. And I was drawn to yoga as an activity to fill that big void, but also to help me recover both physically, mentally. And I went to yoga more for the physical aspect of it. And then I really learned so much more. And so when I was going through physio schooling and yoga at the same time, becoming an instructor, the two always in my mind have blended. And so when I became a physiotherapist, I learned about physio and working with people through the lens of that whole person approach that yoga does through the eight limbs of yoga, where you're not just looking in body systems in isolation, like working on a muscle or the nervous system and thinking of these things in isolation. And so that really began my practice at Vangool Wellness. We've had the clinic now for 14, 15 years. I should know that off the top of my head, but I don't. And so during COVID, as we know, is a challenging time for many people. And I wanted to provide something that would reach people beyond just the individuals that were living in Saskatoon that I got to work with. And so that's what brought me to put it down as kind of an offering for the community and individuals to be able to access these tools and hopefully have a little bit more ease and a little bit more regulation. And really, a lot of it is navigating, a lot of the tools are navigating overwhelm, burnout. And that's what I think we'll get into today. But that's a little bit about me and what brought me to write the book.
Yes, well, thank you for writing this because it came to me in a timely manner. I was struggling a little bit last year, had some anxiety and panic attacks that came unexpectedly in my life, and I couldn't understand why. And then when I read about the nervous system and how, things are all connected and they communicate with each other, it was just my aha moment. And through it all, I ended up finding out I had a thyroid disorder, which when I do start talking a lot, my voice does change for sure. But this book came at a great time for me, and I highly recommend it to people to read this. So thank you so much. And I'm curious though, when you wrote the title, like The Journey of Self Care to We Care, what do you perceive as we care?
I love that question. So there's a piece, the last chapter is basically touches on this concept of the tension required for change. But just as in individuals, when we have a thought, it affects the chemistry of our body, and how we act affects the chemistry of somebody else's body. And so, just like we can't think of our body systems in isolation, we are part of a collective and a system, a society. And what we do in terms of caring for self, it's not selfish, but putting on, often hear your oxygen mask first. It really is the way that we often can start to make a difference in maybe our small family system and then maybe in larger systems. And I think we've all experienced that where we had an interaction with somebody or and it throws us off or it sticks with us longer than it could. And so that's a small example. But then in the last chapter, I talk a little bit about the concepts of dehumanization in healthcare specifically, because I'm in healthcare, and all of these small ways as individuals and as we're part of these systems, how we can make a difference for for the collective, the we care part.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. I also appreciate that you talk about the whole person and not just a specific area. But what I really appreciated too is just the human experience. You help me understand and learn that in life, like we experience so many different things and how it affects our body. And I think so often we tend to ignore our body and not listen to what it's trying to tell us until it's too
Hmm.
late. And so I am very happy to have you here. And I'm going to allow you to, I'm going to share the screen and have you share
Mhm.
with us some of your expertise and wisdom with all of us.
Awesome. Well, thank you. I always like to, when you're talking about we care and whole person, I always like to start from my center, which really is at the core of who I am and how I try and show up in the world. And there's a picture of my husband, Matt, and my two kids, Nahani and Walker, and they're members of the Athabasca Chippewa First Nation. And so I've been able to experience as a non-Indigenous person how, in a small way, through him and the kids, how Indigenous culture really embodies this whole person aspect as well. And so I wanted to have some visuals because I just find for me when I'm listening to a talk and a conversation that in this day and age too, sometimes a visual speaks more than anything. And so
Yeah.
when we're talking about nervous system states and how you were saying that you didn't realize how this one medical condition affected the whole. And
Yes.
I think many of us, whether we have a medical condition or not, have experienced moments like this maybe in the last day, week, or months, especially as summer's winding down and school's approaching, where you're
Yes.
just feeling like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
And so, what do we do in those moments? And so, so much of what I tried to share in the book is tools to regulate the nervous system. So, the intent was for people to have a little bit more of value for themselves and their worth, not in a narcissistic way, but in a loving way so we can show up for those that we care for as well. And I chat a little bit about this in the book, and I know you shared a little bit about your experience when reading it, when you received the book at that time. And I put this part in the book simply because I think the what you do with your website and your community is so important. We learn through sharing stories. And, you know, we all have a story and we don't know what's going on behind the scenes and what somebody may be carrying. And for me, I wanted to share my story that I experienced with my coach. And not, I won't get into the details here, but it was a moment in my life that I felt important to share to connect to the reader and other individuals that maybe experienced something where it created a break or a disembodiment. It created a shift in the nervous system. Sometimes it's gradual and sometimes it's really a dramatic event. And it was through the process of being an athlete and then in my recovery from that, that I used all of these tools I write about in the book to not only regulate my nervous system, but to come back to a sense of self. And the way I like to mention this too is, that little spark we have when we're a kid, that little playful, uninhibited quality that maybe comes out when we drink alcohol, but we shouldn't need alcohol to have it. But you know what I mean?
Yes.
That little spark of play. And then things happen in our life, and it's not just growing up, but that becomes dim and small. And when you were talking about the whispers, that pilot light, that little spark can sometimes feel like it's out or not even going anymore when we're in overwhelm or burnout or experience something hard. And the process of self care is really small actions and behaviors that begin to amplify that little light, that little essence, that spark. And in, y- you know, theory, they talk about that as a biopsychosocial spiritual model. Regardless of your faith or where you're coming from in your practices, it's if people aren't into spiritual stuff, it's that essence piece. So, how do we cultivate the things that feel like a yes in our body and not a yes, but yes, this, but like a full body yes? What does that even feel like in our body? And after I retired as an athlete, I didn't feel much anymore in my body. And so, when we're talking about trying to listen to the whispers, sometimes we're hearing nothing. And then where do we start there? It's simply trying to find these moments of remembering when we felt safe, remembering or imagining that feeling of safety if we've never even felt it before, sadly. But the
Yes.
visualization, the imagining elicits the same feeling as if we've experienced it. And then we simply start small, and then the whispers, we start to build that greater connection, and our nervous system begins to speak more fluidly when we're not in a state of fight, flight, freeze, or disconnection or numbness. Does that make sense, Georgie? Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
it certainly does, and I like the visualization of some people don't know what safety does feel like, and so the visualizing that is something that's a tool that can be very helpful, so thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that people might relate to is the tools that made me a good athlete and achieved all the things on paper, like all my goals and getting into physio and high marks and all that stuff, were met with still a feeling of emptiness. And I think
Yes.
a lot of us, when we're living on the external for if I do this or if I get that, then I'll feel it, then I'll feel whole. Or if we're looking outside
Yeah,
instead of it's hard, but just starting to look inward. And
yeah.
it takes a lot of courage and bravery to do that sometimes when it's been a tool maybe to not look or to avoid uncomfortable feelings. So, Dr. Peter Levine, who does somatic experiencing, talks a lot about titration. Have you talked about this much yet in your talks yet with
Not
Dr. Levine?
really, but I had read your book and you referred to him, so yes,
Yes.
continue
Okay.
on.
Because I saw
I'm
you smile
curious.
and I was like, okay, I'm gonna. Um, and if people don't know that term from chemistry, because it's been a while since I took chemistry, but it's not these big movements. It's not, okay, I'm gonna look inward and face my trauma. It's like you dip your toe in and you come back to what's safe. You dip your toe in and come back. And I always like to give the analogy of a muscle because I'm a physio. But when you're trying to increase muscle length, you do it by consistent, gentle stretches over time. And our nervous system is the same way. We think about the nervous system as this thing we can't touch, we don't know how to deal with. It's similar to a muscle or to any change. Consistent small changes add up. And the nervous system can also start to develop feelings of safety in different contexts and resilience. But it is something that can be done slow, and it should be done slow, especially if it's new for people. So I'm going to flip through a lot of different things, but this is something I hope people take away here is if this concept of nervous system regulation is new, like what does that mean? I think we all can understand what dysregulation feels like, that picture, right? Where you're just like, and you're not your best self. You're reacting, you're spinning out, you're go, 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 go. The other analogy I like to give is when you're dysregulated, it feels like things are moving really fast and you can't keep up with all the things.
Yeah.
And it can even be not logical. You're like, I didn't do much today, but still I'm feeling like overwhelmed. And the nervous system thing to understand is we're still learning about it first. And second is that there's unconscious and conscious aspects of our nervous system. And it's always scanning and asking the question, am I safe? And if the answer is no, then it reaches the conscious and it alerts the stress response. If the answer is yes, then it can elicit a different response of, dopamine and those pleasure hormones. But it's always scanning. It's not something that's on or off. It's always scanning. And people that have experienced maybe their life experience thus far has been more of an environment and life where things didn't feel safe. The filter is set to noticing all the unsafe things. And but we can start to change, and through these tools and what I'm talking about through these practices, we can start to change the filter settings to start to observe, hey, that thing, that's beautiful. So even those things when people are saying, just go touch some grass, go look at some beautiful art, be out in nature, it's meant to target our nervous system and elicit those biological, natural, innate responses of safety. And so those are just some small examples. But I wanted to put this up here for people that are watching it later. just to have an idea of what is happening in our nervous system when we're in more of a chronic state of stress. And this is how the body then, like we were talking about, speaks in whispers, and then it can manifest long enough time. Have experiencing this as your baseline will manifest and can manifest into illness potentially. I'm not drawing a direct line, but and Gabor Mate's work talks about this. But we all know this, right? If you're in a condition for a long time, body adapts to the condition it's in. So if it's a higher stress situation, then you will see physiological changes like this over time that can be risk factors for other diseases later on or conditions. What the regulated response does is the opposite. And so this is where I want to pause and just because usually when people see the stress response, they get stressed that they might be stressed.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah. So, what I want to pause with people here is if we can just take a moment, sit comfortably in your chair, you can join me, and lean against the backrest, close your eyes, and just take one or both hands and rest them gently on your chest. And we're not going to analyze how fast we're breathing or the heart rate. We're just going to feel the sensation of the hands on the chest. Now, try providing a little bit of pressure and then release. And then take one hand to your lower belly. And now see if you can feel that small moving of your belly. Let go of the postural tension. Get lazy in the chair. Take a little longer breath in. Try to feel the belly expand on the inhale. And then go to the bottom of the exhale, feeling your hand come in. One more time like that. Slow, small inhale. And an easy exhale. And then open your eyes. So that's one small practice that practice of noticing first touch and sensation. We cannot sense through the stress response very well.
Right. I'm so sorry to interrupt, but I was thinking about as a teacher, there are so many dysregulated students that this would just help. And it's for everybody, not just the students. But as I read through your dysregulated response versus a regulated response, that was a great shift on how to get a dysregulated person to regulation. So thank you and sorry for interrupting.
No, no, please. That's exactly what I want because I it's interesting you mentioned that. I went and spoke to the schools in Saskatoon this year, the public school, and it was to teachers, but it was also to students and using just these tools there. And Dr. Neff, who writes a lot about self-compassion,
Yeah.
um, has a story that I'd like to share. And so this might be for teachers and providers as well, because she has a story when I was reading her Fierce Self-Compassion book where she has a neurodivergent son. Have you told this story before?
No, that was my favorite book, Fear,
Yes.
Self-Compassion. Yes.
Yes. Okay. So she has a neurodivergent son, and he was older and having a big meltdown, like a 2 or 3 year old would, right, in an airplane. And so she was trying to, we've all been there if you've had children and you're flying, where everyone's looking, you're stressed, and he wasn't settling. He was up and down the aisle, and so she put her hands on her heart and just did that, but then did some of the self compassion. She didn't say anything else out loud, but was saying some of these mantras to herself, calmed herself, and then he stopped and looked at her and settled. And so this relates to what we were talking about at the beginning, self-care to we care. Regulating yourself is also contagious. And it's also, you can do so much by embodying it that can speak more to just talking at people.
Right.
Because people are also, our nervous systems are drawn to calm too. But yeah, that small practice, it does a lot of different areas and works and bypasses the thinking yourself out of stress and goes more into the embodiment part of trying to regulate. But there's really no sustainability without nervous system regulation. And
Mhm.
even if we're dealing with any health conditions, we have an elevated stress response, of course, because it's impacting our whole life. And so, whatever you're going through, you'll never regret learning these tools of regulating your nervous system. It will only be a tool to help whatever other interventions you're doing. And we already touched on this in the beginning, but that's also how we can create more meaningful, sustainable change is when we do interventions, or even if we're not maybe the provider's not giving you an intervention that's whole body, but if you're approaching it through the lens of understanding my whole body is receiving this, even that can create more of those sustainable changes when we're not just thinking of, I'm going to go to my psychologist and then I'm going to go to the person that does this for my body here, and then I'm going to go over there. But understanding that all of these systems are influencing each other all the time, whether it's a small injury or a larger diagnosis or a stressful situation, for example. But this is what I mentioned at the beginning in terms of self-care to we care is we are human beings that are made of systems and we live in systems. What we think can change the chemistry of our own body, and how we act can change the chemistry of someone else's body.
Mm.
And so it's when life seems out of control and there's a lot of things we can't change, what we can control are shifting our viewpoint, shifting the constant background role of our self-talk. Those are small things that we can control and change. And then maybe it will lead to making uh, different decisions or actions in small ways that lead to bigger life-changing things, whether that's slowly listening to when it's actually a no and not a yes, and then moving in this direction, which then all of a sudden gave this opportunity for that and that. And then suddenly we're taking a different career path that feels more aligned. It doesn't start with, this is what I got to do. It might
Mhm.
start with just starting to make decisions that feel calming. The way I like to think of it, saying yes to yourself feels the same way like receiving love from someone that, or a loving compliment or love from somebody that you can be vulnerable with. Because saying yes to yourself is small acts of love, really.
Yeah. Well said.
And but I know it sounds woo woo and stuff sometimes, and sometimes when you're in the thick of it, it's hard to see your way out. But that's where I go, start small, start so small. And you being a vice principal, you've probably experienced this in people and family systems, or if you're just caring for others, there's this term of compassion fatigue. And I love the way that Dr. Neff talks about it. And I talk a little bit in the book about compassion fatigue versus
Mhm.
empathy fatigue. And I think it's really, I wanted to spend a little bit on this and provide some images for people to really hone in on it. I think we all understand empathy is, feel the, and when we glorify it too, which is, it's a good thing to be empathetic. I think empathy is missing in a lot of areas in life right now. But empathy is that capacity to feel another's experience. And it's really important biologically, evolutionary for social cohesion. But if that's our only way of relating to ourselves, or the environment, and others around us, it also can lead to a lot of burnout. And so I'm not saying not to be empathetic, but I
Mhm.
think it's important to develop the skill and practice of compassion because it has a different feeling and actually physiology in our body. Empathy activates the amygdala, or that emotional center in our brain, that nervous system we spoke about earlier, the feeling safe or feeling in the stress response. So if we're in a scenario where we're doing, let's say, our a professional work from a place of empathy all the time, and it's a very challenging environment where people are going through a lot of stuff, we're going to be feeling what everybody's feeling and activating our emotional center and burning out our nervous system. Compassion, with studies they've done, actually activates the reward center of our brain, and it generates feelings of kindness and interest, and it actually activates the feeling of reward. And it's not that you're any less present or giving, but it's coming from a place of the desire to alleviate suffering without feeling everything that person's feeling. And
Right.
I had to develop that with in physio because seeing quite a few people a lot, and people when they're seeing physio, maybe it's not in the ER, but it's people are going through stuff, and it's if they're in physio, they're not having their best day either. and and so that ability to stay in your nervous system, not theirs, but of course with that strong desire to alleviate suffering. And then it's a way to still do that beautiful work, but also in a more meaningful way, because then you have also, when you're not in their nervous system, you can access more of your whole brain center to do your role, to make the right decisions, to see what's needed, to see the whole picture. And so I really invite people to dive into this work, self compassion and compassion, and develop these tools because it can really help you if you are somebody who this resonates with you and you do experience empathetic burnout. And then as we segue into some of the self care, self compassion pieces, I really like this quote where Dr. Neff says, "Everyone benefits from kindness and generosity when it's freely given, and we must include ourselves in the circle of generosity." And figuring out how to care for others without abandoning ourselves. And I think so many people that are drawn to the helping professions and the giving professions, it's it's kind of w- maybe it's an older school way of thinking, but it's not looked down upon, but it's not encouraged to think about yourself.
Yeah.
And and I like the way that she puts it because thinking of yourself is not to think about others, but it's just including yourself in the circle. And
Yeah.
I really liked the way that she put that because it allowed my old thinking of feeling bad
Yeah.
about thinking about myself, being selfish, to no, I'm just including myself in the circle. I just really like that imagery too.
Yes. I
Um,
do appreciate Dr. Kristen Neff's work, and that is, some of the things I follow, and I've done some research regarding that. So, I'm so glad that you brought her up because it's worthwhile to explore her stuff.
yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
and maybe you can get her as a speaker.
I've
That'd be
tried.
awesome.
I have tried. But you know
Get her
what?
as a
I'm
speaker.
okay with 1 no, and I think I stop at
Yes.
3. So,
Okay.
she's gonna get another letter coming soon.
I love it. That's great. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit here because self care often has quite a misnomer. And some people are like, "Are you sure you want to call it self care?" And part of the like rebel in me was like, yeah, because I think we need to reclaim what self care means because it's not a bubble bath. It's not being selfish. It's actions and behaviors that are good for you and good for your nervous system. That's all. It's being kind to yourself, not above or below anyone, just including yourself in the circle. And Dr. Neff talks about self care as it's a it's under the umbrella of self compassion. And this is what I think is part of this too is when we were doing at the beginning, putting our hands on the heart and developing some language that you say to yourself is also helpful, whether you want to say it out loud or whether you want to journal it. And it might seem weird to read this and to say it, but it's giving yourself the compassion you would give another so freely. So if you are in a moment of overwhelm or you're in the thick of it or whatever it might be, place your hands on your heart or whatever you want to do, but just take a moment to acknowledge that whether I feel sad, I feel angry, I'm overwhelmed, and then put it in the context of time. I didn't have this here, but I'm overwhelmed right now
Oh,
because it's not forever. I'm feeling sad right now. I'm angry right now. And then that other piece of common humanity of I'm not alone. And whatever languages, all people feel this way sometimes, or all, you know, teachers, all parents. This is, you're not alone in this experience. And then this is the one that was kind of weird for me to start to do at first, but then I really found it the last piece that helped me land and receive that self compassion is it's kind of like if you've ever written a letter to your younger self and how
yes.
that can sometimes elicit a lot of feelings and emotions because I'm sorry you feel this way. you know, and that little bit of self-compassion, and I'm sorry you feel this way, it really lands and gives you the ability to move through whatever you might have been fighting against. And these are just some really beautiful self-compassion, nervous system regulation tools that I hope people can take away from today. But it is
Definitely.
the most precious gift we can give to ourselves and those we
Yeah.
care for.
Yeah.
Um,
You, brought to my attention when, to write a letter to your younger self. My family's home burned down just before my dad had passed away. It burned down to the ground, and my sister did manage to find and get some pictures, so we saved the pictures.
um,
And she gave us just 6 months ago, there was just in a Ziploc bag, she handed each one of her siblings a package. And when I opened it, one of my pictures fell out, and it was this little girl, of course. And
mhm.
I looked directly into my eyes and I thought to myself, I haven't done enough for her. And that shifted my thinking. And now whatever I do, I just feel like I need to do it for that little girl. So it's helped me.
Yes.
Yes.
That's so, thank you for sharing that. It's so beautiful. And I did, this isn't in the book, but I wrote this a little while ago. And it just, when you said that, if you don't mind, I want to read this poem
Absolutely.
because I don't think we do enough of looking at ourselves in the eyes and seeing ourselves, right? These moments of self compassion are seeing ourselves in real time. So this is called Woman in the Mirror. I look in the mirror. Is that you I see? A vague familiarity begins to form, creating a sensation I've not felt before. A warmth in my chest, creating water in my eyes, a sense of grief and love for this woman in the mirror. Has she been there the whole time? She looks nothing like the vision I've held in my mind, yet familiar enough that I want to get to know her. My search to better understand and serve you has catapulted me on a path to better know myself. From me to we and back to me, a circle of integration and discovery. Driven by a thirst to know, new worth begins to grow. Born from my desire to be free of the pain, not knowing the journey would bring me back to you. Cultivating a love so deep, you almost become recognizable to me. Now looking in the mirror at you, I almost see me.
Wow, that is beautiful.
And I
Beautiful.
feel like what you just spoke to is looking at that little girl. You are that little girl, you know?
Yes.
And that's what this returning to worth, it's seeing ourselves and that spark that's still there, and then starting to make small choices that are for us. Yes,
Yes.
in real time. Yeah.
Yes.
And so this picture of the hand on the heart, sometimes this physical um, touch can be what we need to regulate if the other thinking our way through isn't working, isn't having the result.
Mhm.
And I think this is an important thing for people to start. And I want to leave this with people to reflect on. Everybody's journey is different, and everybody's body speaks in different ways. We've all had different lived experiences. And so starting to just reflect and create space to wonder, how does your body communicate that you're extending beyond your capacity? Like, how does your body communicate a no? Is it a closing of the chest? Is it tightening of the jaw? Is it just a hesitation? And those are the small whispers I'm referring to. But it's just starting to sense into little body sensations. And when you're pausing that little bit to try and sense, you're regulating your nervous system because, again, you're sensing through that part of your nervous system that can't sense that sensation if you're in a stress response. So I mentioned this already, but the self care, I want to say this over again. It's not a bubble bath. I mean, it might be if that's what you need, but it's behaviors that we use to stay healthy and prevent suffering. And yeah, those actions and behaviors. And are you okay if I read another poem?
Oh, for sure. I love the first one.
Okay.
I'd like to hear others.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah. Yeah.
You write
Because
beautifully, by the way. I really
Oh, well,
liked the every chapter had a little bit of an insert there, and I really appreciated what you wrote. Yeah.
thank you. Because I think that act of poetry comes from reflection, but poetry to me speaks to the emotional center, which is what we're trying to reach in these reflective practices. But
Yeah.
for me, this really summarizes kind of the last part of what I want to share. And it's rethinking how we approach self care, but rethinking how we show up for ourselves. So it's called Loving into Wholeness, and that's on page 82. Let's reimagine our approach to health and wellness. Our bodies need to be nurtured back to health and well being, not whipped into shape. It's through the process of loving ourselves into wholeness that we move into a space of balance of being and feeling enough. The discipline is in loving yourself, not whipping yourself. I love myself enough to be honest and do what I need with both effort and ease. I love myself enough to show up for me. I love myself enough to know my limits. I love myself as I am, not because I've done anything to prove I'm worthy of it. Embarking on this journey is the greatest act of love and healing. I commit to myself. And I wanted to share that because we receive so many messages that prey on the not being enough, whether it's physical, whether it's productivity. And the answer is not pushing harder. And like we chatted about at the beginning, the answer is not out there and it seems soft, but it's through these, it's hard to do. It's hard to be disciplined in saying what is right for yourself when you feel like you might let someone down. If you're externally people pleasing, right? It's shifting the discipline towards ignoring yourself and pushing through the boot camp, or ignoring yourself and getting up early, even though, sometimes the saying yes is gentle, a gentle act of eating better. Sometimes the discipline is, for me, for example, making sure that I put my phone down an hour before bed and get to bed early. It's hard, but it's
Yeah.
that commitment to making those decisions in a loving way for yourself and not constantly pushing beyond your capacity.
Thank you for
And
sharing that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
In the summer when I have more time, I challenge myself and I call them crazy challenges, but last year I wanted to do a half a marathon, so I googled how many kilometers it was, and so a week later I went and walked the 21 or 22 kilometers. It did start to rain, so I got soaking wet, but this year I decided to walk 10 kilometers per day for 10 days. And I do
Yeah.
that for myself because sometimes I have self-doubt, and
Hmm.
it's to prove to myself that I can do it, and it also helps me understand that, like, that's not easy. It's not like I'm not athletic by any means, but when life gets hard, I remind myself, "Hey, you just walk 10 kilometers every day for 10 days. You can do this." So those are some of the things
Yeah.
that have worked for me. So,
Absolutely. And I like what you said, you broke it down. These small, consistent actions are more sustainable, but they're way more impactful. They like the New Year's resolution things, right? They should call it the shame spiral because,
I
right?
like that.
Because it's, and then you do, oh, there, I did it again. I knew I couldn't do it. And then I let myself down again. And it's like, don't put yourself, just start small. And then the more you show up for yourselves, you get the reward center. And then you start feeling like, well, I did this hard thing over there. And when I did that hard thing, this time I was present in my body to witness myself. And when I come back to like my sporting career, like I did these cool things. I traveled the world for pole vault, but I wasn't in my body to witness it.
Yes.
And I think how many times, and that's why it felt empty.
Yeah.
And so you can achieve high and you can achieve often higher. Some of the research is saying actually we have more resilience when we have a self compassion or self care practice. And so the old school grit and bear it, there might be moments we just have to do that, but that's not the default setting. It doesn't set us up for sustainable high performance, but it also does not set us up for sustainable whole health. So I'm wondering, Georgie, if I can kind of close this part of it with just guiding people through what breath meditation and a body scan might feel like and look
Yes.
like. And then I can close down kind of the images here. Okay. Because sometimes I get a lot, especially with people coming in the clinic where they go, I've been doing box breathing and a breath practice and it's not working. And I go, okay, well, how are you doing it? And they're going, what? And there's so much online right now about breath work and stuff.
Yeah.
And so this is a public service announcement. If you're doing breath work to regulate your nervous system, it should not make you feel stressed, breathless, or strained. It's simply meant, it should make you have a better sense of calm. And so I would like to show people what that can feel like, and then they can always see somebody in their local area to help them if they want to explore it further. But this is what I would recommend to try for a starting point. So if we can, like we did at the beginning, sitting in your chair, you're listening to this laying down, but let your arms come down. And yes, this is a physio telling you to get lazy with your spine. So just let your head relax, your shoulders come forward, whatever your body needs to do to let go of that postural tension. Letting the belly go, letting the jaw open slightly, and seeing where you can soften a little more around the hips and along the spine. And as you let go of that postural tension, you might notice the breath moving the body. And as we let go of the postural tension, the movement of breath occurs lower down. So instead of in the chest, it's more subtle and soft in the lower ribs and lower abdominal area. Watch that natural rhythm of your breath, not judging it, just observing. And then try to add just like 2% to the top of your inhale, and then add another 2% to the bottom of your exhale. Do that a couple more times with your own breath rate. Then you can open your eyes. So, what we did there was the first three: breath, meditation, and a body scan. And I like to, for new people to these types of practices, the body scan, just the simple practice of letting go of tension and noticing, and just start to scan and pick different spots in your body. It's also a way to start to know how your body speaks to you in tension. If you start to notice, oh, I didn't realize I was clenching my jaw, or I didn't realize my shoulders were that high. That act of that body scan, when we let go of postural tension, our postural muscles are also our respiratory muscles. So when we're letting go of the postural tension, and then we start to gently expand the breath, we'll start to then do the breath work from a place that is calming rather than starting and trying to put a calm breath on body tension. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So yeah, so starting
Mm.
with that body scan practice might be where people are and just watching your breath. The meditation we did is more of a mindful meditation. This is really important too, and I talk about it in the book, is that there's lots of different types of meditation and they're all beneficial. But in the research they found a mindful meditation produced greater changes in inflammatory markers in the body than compared to a focused and other types of meditations. So, what that means is, what's mindfulness? It's the act of noticing in a non judgmental way. And so, that language I used there, I said, watch the breath, don't change it or judge it, just notice. And your brain immediately will go to, oh, da, 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 but I was going to do that. Oh, no, I'm just watching. And so that's the practice. It's like we go, oh, I'm scanning my body. Oh, but I was going to do this thing over here. No, come back. There is no, that is meditation. It's body scan. There's no like, I didn't do it right because I got distracted. That is human nature. It's just coming back over and over again to noticing. And then I love the breath as a tool because then it gives your mind something to focus on. And when you work on expanding a little and dropping a little, it helps us start with where we are in that moment and then begin to build a practice. And those three first things we went through with the compassion, self talk are really great foundations for starting to regulate the nervous system and tools that we can do that don't cost anything and they're accessible at any time throughout the day. So I'll kind of leave it there with the presentation part of things and maybe we can I'll leave it to you to kind of if there's any things you want to chat more about on that or any thoughts.
Well, I was thinking how breath work is so important, and as women giving birth to babies, we have to do the breath work, and yet we forget about it after we have the babies and,
Yeah.
after when we're in stress where, breath work is so important, and we need to go back to that because I think, like I said, it's easier to regulate yourself through your breath. So,
Yes.
yes. And
Absolutely.
I just wanted to ask, is there any questions that we might have from other people here? Just wanting to open it up if there are any questions. And if not, that's okay. So I was just thinking, what a better world we would live in if families and workplaces and communities would understand that self compassion is not selfish. And I think that is just something that we all need to realize because if we're not filling up our own cup, no one else is, and we can't pour from an empty cup. So I appreciate
Yeah.
your messaging.
Thank
Yes.
you. And I think it extends like you were talking about. I've spoken in some workplaces in terms of system change too, because then you start to ask the question, is this environment set up for burnout? And then maybe there's some ways we can start to advocate for policy change or things like that that can maybe promote more of a sustainable environment, workplace system for us to be able to be our best selves. And also that does create the best outcomes too.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think we're coming to an end here, and I've just wrote some questions down, so I want to make sure, and you've answered
Mm,
most of them as we went through. I appreciate in your book, and I don't want to, we don't have to go into the detail, but I appreciated you speaking about your story and your traumatic experience and how you overcame that. And, it's taken a lot of time to heal, but I wanted to say I appreciated reading that because it showed to me that we're not alone. And people, like you mentioned, go through different life altering experiences and their own traumatic experiences. And we do have to heal to be our better selves, for sure, our best selves. So I wanted to
yeah.
thank you for writing that. Mm.
Well, thank you. And thank you for saying that. And I really did think about including it or not because many reasons. Like I said at the beginning, I felt like I've learned so much through the sharing of stories and maybe people haven't had that exact experience, but sometimes we can look at our own tough times in a different way when reading some a perspective from somebody else. And I don't get into details, so it's not like trauma reading, but it's just enough to hopefully elicit, like you said, that reflection of, how we can overcome and that hopefully not to lose hope.
Right. Yes. And I think that's really important because, if you don't have hope, you don't have much, to help you get through things. So, one last question. Why do you think that we are so disconnected from ourselves in the first place? Like, why? You talk about connections and the whole person. Why do you think we're so
Yes. Yeah.
disconnected?
I think we are so distracted and it's very easy to be distracted and pulled away from yourself. And I think we also live in a society that really values productivity, and we're either being sold something, marketed. Our attention is being pulled because attention leads to hits, likes, marketing, advertising, you know? And so I think we also live in a society that values what did you do today more than how are you today?
Mm.
And I think that it's on each individual to really go against the norms, go against, because it's hard. This is where I talk about the discipline and committing to yourself. It's hard to not fall into the distraction and disconnection. But then suddenly we wake up and we're like, why am I so overwhelmed and depleted? And so we need to, the hard work, just like we brush our teeth, is cultivating these practices of connection to self, connection to others, like what you're doing with this community. How good does it feel when you just have a good talk with a girlfriend, or you look someone in the eye and they tell you how they're really doing? And I think it takes consciousness to know I'm making a decision to not be distracted, and consciously deciding where do I want to put my energy. And those are acts of self-care in my mind. So it can be something as small as that, where being discerning, being conscious of my energy is valuable. Where do I want to put it? And where do I want to put my attention? And so that's to me a act of self-care.
Yes, thank you. And a couple of takeaways for me was, we don't have to have self-care as something big. We don't need to go to a spa, but it's the small, consistent steps that we take or changes that we make that will benefit us as a whole. So yes, thank you so much, Adrian. I have appreciated
You.
this conversation. And like I said, it's always when I do these things, it's like girlfriends talking to each other.
Yeah.
And I appreciate it. Yeah.
Thank
So
you so much. It was fun.
yes, thank you. And before I let you go, I just wanted to mention our next speakers will be Darren Lang is in October. And this is just announced today. I will start advertising it, but we'll also have another guest speaker. Her name is Corliss Russell, and she's actually hosting this huge conference, Lead Conference Canada 2026 in Saskatoon. And she's agreed to be a guest speaker on authentic self compassion. So those will be our two in October. And as usual, I give some prizes. So I am going to purchase a book, and I'm sorry I'm at the lake, so I can't purchase it yet. But I will purchase your book here, Adrian, and it will be going to Kristen Quinn. So thank you so much. And
Awesome.
I hope, Kristen, you appreciate and enjoy this book as much as I have. So thank you, thank you, thank you. So, all right, everybody, I am going to say goodbye and thank you for coming. And I know that it's summertime and it's so hard to get people off the beach, off the lake, and whatever the fun activities they're doing, but greatly appreciate it. And stay tuned for the next guest speaker. So, bye for now.